The other battle going on over abortion bans. There was a hearing also on the Hill talking about abortion rights, and it was like no other that we have seen in quite some time. Congresswomen actually told their own personal stories of abortion, and it was emotional and it was candid. And Democratic Congresswoman Cori Bush, who actually you just saw talking about infrastructure with Rachel, said in that hearing that she had an abortion after being raped at the age of 17, saying that she's not ashamed of it. Then on the other side, Republican Congresswoman Kat Cammack, and she said her mother's doctor actually advised her to get an abortion because of personal health risks. But Cammack is alive today, and she was testifying today because her mother said no. Take a listen.
I was 18, I was broke, and I felt so alone. I blamed myself for what had happened to me. But I knew I had options. Choosing to have an abortion was the hardest decision I had ever made. But at 18 years old, I knew it was the right decision for me. To all the black women and girls who have had abortions and will have abortions, we have nothing to be ashamed of. We live in a society that has failed to legislate love and justice for us. So we deserve better. We demand better. We are worthy of better. So that's why I'm here to tell my story. So today, I sit before you as that nurse, as that pastor, as that activist, that survivor, that single mom, that congresswoman, to testify that in the summer of 1994, I was raped, I became pregnant, and I chose to have an abortion.
I was not supposed to be here. I would not be here had it not been for the very brave choice that my mother made 33 years ago. But because of her strength, she chose life. That wasn't an easy decision for a single mom, for a working class mom. Someone herself who had lived a life of disappointments, of struggle, addiction, and yet, despite everything, she chose life. She did something that many of my colleagues here could have done.
Powerful testimony, right? Both sides there laying it out. This hearing actually comes as a Texas law effectively banning abortion after 6 weeks faces a challenge in court from the Justice Department. Women in Washington and across the country are expected to march in favor of abortion rights actually this weekend. And the Supreme Court this session considers a case out of Mississippi seen as a test case to overturn Roe versus Wade. Joining me now, Jacqueline Ayers. She's a senior vice president for Planned Parenthood. Jacqueline, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Look, you served as legislative aide in the U.S. House of Representatives covering health, education, judiciary issues. What power, even precedent, do these personal testimonies that we just heard from members of the House from both sides actually hold, and how significant were they today?
Well, we should first note that Roe is literally hanging by a thread. What happened today on Capitol Hill, those 3 members of Congress bravely telling their abortion stories, is so important because this conversation is really needed. We need to make sure that people understand what is really happening. It's not just Texas. We have seen in 2021 the most state restrictions passed and going into law than ever before. There is an all-out assault on Roe, and I want to thank Representative Lee, Representative Bush, and Representative Jayapal for telling their brave story today. It's so important to help reduce abortion stigma.
And the House already passed a measure aimed at putting abortion rights into law, but it's symbolic. It's going nowhere in the Senate. Democrats say that the point of today's hearing was actually to examine federal action to push back against these state laws. So, Jacqueline, do you have thoughts on what that could look like?
Yeah, well, the House did take a very important first step. It is really critical that they pass the Women's Health Protection Act as a way to protect abortion access. And more importantly, they are demonstrating where we know the American voters and constituencies are. In no state in the country is passing a ban on abortion a popular idea. It's highly out of touch, and we know that the politicians who are pushing these bans absolutely need to be stopped. You just referenced the fact that we are going to see people taking to the streets in city after city and state after state. People are going to be continuing to push. We also know that there are leaders in the Senate who are continuing to talk to their colleagues about the need for the Women's Health Protection Act. And we know that there's still more that can be done to increase access to abortion at the state level, but also increasing access to health care. One of the things that we heard today from those representatives who bravely told their stories is the inequities in the healthcare system that are letting people have to make these very difficult choices and decisions. And so we know that there more can be done to improve healthcare access, and that has to include access to abortion.
And Jacqueline, it's Terry Moran. As you mentioned, the states are proceeding against abortion rights. Roe versus Wade is already de facto overturned by the state of Texas. And does the fact that Texas has succeeded so far in banning most abortions and evading the scrutiny of the federal courts and the Supreme Court allowing them to do that, and maybe even being on the cusp of revising Roe itself, does it suggest a future shift in abortion legislation? Do you foresee federal legislation that can get passed given the situation out in the states?
I think we're going to continue to see momentum growing. We've already seen, in the last few years, more and more support coming out for abortion access. We saw the president's budget that was introduced that for the first time in decades removed a restrictive Hyde Amendment that would prevent people who rely on the Medicaid program to get access to abortion. We saw the House follow suit and pass a bill that did not include those restrictions. And we know that we're going to continue to see people speak up. That's what's going to make a change and a shift in this trajectory of what we're seeing in the court and the restrictive legislation that we're seeing in the state. In fact, we know 80% of American voters do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. And what is happening right now in Texas is just a red alert. It's the alarm that we need everybody paying attention to, that people are having to drive hundreds of miles outside of the state to get access to care and to be able to access their constitutional right. I don't think that we're done with the court case. I think we're going to continue to see people fighting in the courts and many people starting to take to the streets.
Yeah, all this in the middle of a pandemic as well. When Congresswoman Cori Bush shared her personal story today, she concluded, but we deserve better. We demand better. We are worthy of better. There was something so moving about her stepping forward, proudly saying there's no reason to be ashamed, and we stand as equal citizens under the law. We deserve better. What does that better look like to you?
I think this conversation started on Capitol Hill today was so important. We applaud those members. What this is going to do is make sure that people understand abortion is health care. Abortion is common. 1 in 4 women in this country will have need to access abortion. And so we need to make sure that there are not barriers, state restrictions, federal programs, that there's support for a robust healthcare system that meets people's needs where they are right now. And I think what we heard Representative Bush talk about is that our healthcare system is failing us. And we know how, right? We know how to do this. You just referenced the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. We know that we can have the full weight of the federal government behind these issues. And we are really expecting politicians at all levels to step up right now and ask what they can do to be helping people in the state of Texas and these many surrounding states. We know, again, it's not just Texas. There are going to be many states that try and copycat the state of Texas. We already have heard Florida legislators indicating their intent to do this. It is not acceptable that your access to your constitutional right to abortion depends on your zip code. That's where we are today in this country, and I think that's why you're going to see people out on October 2nd and in city after city and state after state saying that this is not how healthcare access should be. We should not be targeting and attacking women's healthcare, and we're going to make sure that politicians continue to push to actually reflect the views of their constituents.
Kat, you heard at the beginning of, or Jacqueline, you heard at the beginning of the segment, the powerful testimonies from the women in Congress there who identify themselves on both sides. There was pro-life Kat Kamik, which I would just, why Kat was in my head, and she was sharing that she would even be here if her mother had followed her doctor's recommendation to get an abortion. And then you had Congresswoman Virginia Foxx stating, quote, "Life is the most fundamental of all rights. Children in the womb are people. They are innocent lives who do not deserve death," end quote. How do you feel about their testimonies and what they had to say and how they came across?
I think that the people who told their story today about access to abortion help understand that this is a personal decision. I think everyone who testified at this important oversight hearing made sure that the personal decision that is made best for them has to be left to them and their doctor and their family. Each of the members of Congress who told their stories actually reflect why these decisions have to be personal. They're not to include politicians. And if anything, I think the stories from both sides demonstrate why this is not an area to be legislating.
And looking ahead now to this Supreme Court challenge to the constitutionality of Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban, it seems, yeah, as you've been talking about, Roe versus Wade is really on the line in the court around the country. So if Roe goes and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which confirmed and expanded the meaning of Roe, if the right under the Constitution to choose an abortion goes, then what?
Yeah, I think, we know that the politicians in the state of Mississippi are not hiding the ball. They made really clear in their declarations to the court that they want to see Roe v. Wade fall. That's what they are hoping to achieve in the Dobbs versus Jackson women's health case that will be argued on December 1st before the Supreme Court. What we know is that that position is just not popular. That is not the position of where the American voters are. It is not reflective of what we've seen poll after poll, especially right now because of Texas. This issue is really top of mind for many people. And we know that if the Mississippi law is allowed to stand, what that means is that state by state, many states try and copycat this. So we know that we have to continue seeking out, pushing the courts, and getting people who are motivated and act in action to take to the streets and to make sure that we're doing more and more we can, again, to make sure that our healthcare system is actually serving people, because right now we're failing if your healthcare depends on what state you live in.
Planned Parenthood's Jacqueline Ayers. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining us with your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.